friends. This is the program Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media, how Russian television rewrites reality, around the Trump plan, analysis of a 60 Minutes episode. In the latest episode of 60 Minutes, Russian state television demonstrates a rare example of how an information construct is literally created live on air. Officially, the pretext is leaks about Trump's 28-point peace plan. However, the content of the episode demonstrates not an attempt to analyze this document, but rather an effort to fit it into a narrative already familiar to Russian propaganda. Ukraine as a weakened and dependent territory, Europe as a hysterical and secondary actor, the US as a source of pressure, and Russia as the sole beneficiary and arbiter of the future order. This picture is not only created for the Russian public, it also seems to be aimed at European viewers. Moscow is trying to convince them that war and peace in Ukraine are no longer a matter for Kyiv, but a bargaining chip between the US and Russia, from which Europe is being steadily squeezed out. 1. Initial frame, Trump's ultimatum and Kyiv's predetermined capitulation. Skabiva begins with a dramatic thesis. Trump's peace plan supposedly became an ultimatum for Zelensky, and time remains until Thursday. The deadline is used as a pressure tool within the program itself. It creates the impression that the US is ready to shut down the Ukrainian army at any moment, stop arms supplies, cease intelligence sharing, and leave Kyiv alone with Moscow. This artistic device accomplishes 3 goals. 1. To remove Ukraine's agency. Its fate is determined in Washington and Moscow. 2. To create the image of the inevitability of concessions, as if there are no longer military and political alternatives. 3. Present the US not as an ally, but as a blackmailer whose pressure is no different from Russian demands. Within Russian logic, this allows for the desired conclusion to the story. Ukraine's capitulation is not a tragedy, but a rational solution, to which the West itself is driving it. Bloomberg writes that Trump's Ukraine plan and the tight deadline for Zelensky to sign the documents on Thursday have backed Europe into a corner. Polish Prime Minister Tusk publicly doubted that the document was drafted in Washington, hinting at the Kremlin's hand. But Rubio puts the conspiracy theorists in their place. The peace proposal was developed by the United States. It is offered as a solid basis for ongoing negotiations. The plan is based on information received from the Russian side, as well as on information previously received and currently being received from Ukraine. Former British Prime Minister Johnson, who has already torpedoed a peace deal, declared that Trump's plan was drawn up by the Kremlin. He considers the Washington peace process a betrayal and military castration. And now they're talking about some new 28-point plan to end the war. And it could have been written entirely by the Kremlin. This is ridiculous. The so-called peace plan envisages the military castration of Ukraine. 2. Ukraine as an object of pressure and a country in political collapse. Throughout the story, Skabiva emphasizes Kyiv's internal weakness. Umarov's broken pen is presented as a symbol of panic. Within Zelensky's team, there is corruption, criminal cases, and division. The president himself is portrayed as simultaneously illegitimate, with references to Trump, dependent on external dictates, and incapable of managing the situation. These elements combine to form a single narrative. A country in crisis cannot resist the peace plan and is obliged to cede territory. The presentation is clear: to create the impression in the viewer that Ukrainian resistance is not a geopolitical choice, but the whim of an elite that has long since lost its footing. 3. Europe as an irritated and powerless observer. Special attention is given to the EU, which is demonstratively humiliated in the episode. Europe torpedoes the American plan, which means it is interfering with peace. The 24-point counterplan is presented as a failed attempt to seize the initiative. Rubio publicly ignores European proposals, which is presented as evidence that Washington no longer considers Europe a participant in the process. The media cites panic, the corner of a cornered Europe, and attempts to buy time. Key idea: Europe has lost its voice, and in matters of war and peace, it should look to the United States and Russia. It's important for European readers to understand this is not a description of real diplomacy, but a targeted political strategy, an attempt to destroy European unity and sow doubt in transatlantic relations. 4. The US as a source of harsh rationality and an instrument of pressure on Kyiv, the program deliberately invests the Trump administration with maximum agency. The Americans issued an ultimatum. Driscoll speaks rudely to Zelensky. Washington offers the best Ukraine can get. The last 2 meters to peace depend on Kyiv's willingness to concede. The gist of the presentation is this: America has decided that Ukraine must agree to Russia's terms, and Moscow, in turn, is ready to constructively discuss. In other words, the viewer is led to believe that the US has effectively sided with the Kremlin, and only Ukraine and Europe are resisting rational peace. Think, analyze, draw conclusions, and don't be fooled. This was the program Empire of Lies.